It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A beautiful day for a neighbor. Could you be mine? Would you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood. A neighborly day for a beauty. Could you be mine? Would you be mine?
Welcome to the Real Film Nerds Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Real Film Nerds Podcast. With me, as always, my good buddy, Mysterious Mike.
Hey, everybody. Matt, that was good, man. That was good. I thought you were going to screw it up, but you did good.
Did you like that?
I did like it.
My Shatner-inspired singing of the iconic Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood intro song.
Yeah, no, I liked it. I liked it a lot.
There was still two more paragraphs to go, but I decided to pass on them because, as I was pointed out earlier, our musical songs are too long in the podcast, so I cut it back.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. I'm okay with it. With that, I'll just go into it. This is about Won't You Be My Neighbor?
I was going to say, what's the name of the film that we are reviewing today, Michael?
It's a documentary, biography about Mr. Rogers. And I'll read the plot summary. It's an exploration of the life, lessons, and legacies of iconic children's television host, Fred Rogers. This was directed by Morgan Neville. And since it's a documentary, it doesn't really have any writers on it. But it's starring Joanne Rogers and Fred Rogers and Jim Rogers and John Rogers. Yo-Yo Ma is in this several times. There's some presidents. It's got quite the cast of people, and everybody's themselves because it's a documentary.
Yeah, it's archival footage.
Yeah,
or interviews with his wife Joanne Rogers or his sons.
Yeah,
all remembering their father and or husband.
Yeah, this movie it was very limited release when it came out, and both Matt and I really wanted to see it. It was very highly anticipated. And Matt, what did you think?
As most of you should know from listening to previous episodes of this podcast, because we've been talking about it for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks at least.
Yeah, I think maybe even 4 weeks, because I think it was released a little while ago, and it had taken the time to get a little bit bigger.
Well, I enjoyed this documentary quite a bit. I love documentaries, especially being a former photojournalist. I love true stories. I love real stories. I love stories just in general, but I really enjoy documentaries. I watch a fair share of them on Netflix and Amazon and HBO and things. I like that show Vice. That's pretty good to watch. I like watching 60 Minutes. So I'm a fan of the documentary and real news. But the only caveat I have on this is I don't know why people are going so crazy over this film, saying you have to see it. It's going to change your life kind of thing. And I didn't come out of it feeling like that. I felt that it was a good film. I think it was timed right. It came out at a good time. It was a very well done documentary. Great interviews. Great use of archival footage. I learned a lot from it. I did not know he was a minister, which is interesting because when I went to work and was telling people at work about seeing this film, I didn't know that he was a minister, and they all seemed to know that, which, okay, I guess I missed that. I don't know. And then a lot of the controversies that were surrounding Mr. Rogers, I did not know about those, and I thought that was a nice little addition that they touched on that. It wasn't a large part of the film, but it was probably a good solid 15, 20 minutes about all the controversies surrounding him that I personally was not aware of.
Yeah, for me, Matt, just to cut you off a little bit, was...
yeah, go for it, man.
I... grew up watching this, like I think millions and millions of other kids, but I did not know that it had been on for so long, and that he had covered so many controversial topics, and that there was this protesting of Mr. Rogers for some reasons that I'm sure we'll go into here in a little bit, but it was just, and I didn't know he was a minister either, so that was cool. I thought it was all very educational.
Which is interesting because both of us, with our religious upbringings, I figured, oh, well, that's probably why my mom had me watch Mr. Rogers, is because he was religious. And I asked my mom, and she's like, no, I had no idea either. So I thought that was pretty cool. My mother specifically liked to have me watch Mr. Rogers. We talked a little bit about it after I saw it, which inspired her to go see it, and she saw it this past weekend as well. The big reason why she liked sitting me down in front of Mr. Rogers and having me watch him as I was growing up as a kid was that he taught you things, and he did it like for kids. I was going to say like a kid, but for kids to be able to understand what he's trying to present, and he never talked down to the kids or nothing. She felt that he was a great teaching tool.
Yeah, and he'd even highlighted his almost obsession with child development and how the way that the scripts and the way the stuff was written. And in the beginning of the movie, it even states that for whatever reason, Mr. Rogers, or Fred Rogers, was able to remember his childhood and how he felt, and was always trying to emulate those feelings and understood that where a child's mindset was, and was trying to speak to that.
Well, I think a lot of that comes from him and some of the hardships he had growing up as a child, which they touch on very little. They don't touch on a whole lot, but he was an overweight kid. He was bullied a lot growing up. He had a lot of diseases, so he spent a lot of time in hospital beds as well. And so that's where he developed this really wonderful imagination that he had. So I think a lot of it stems from that.
Yeah. No, it did touch on that a little bit, yeah. Fat Rogers, I think they called him, or something.
Yeah, it was something like
Fred
that.
Or something like that.
Fat Freddy, yeah.
Fat Freddy.
Right.
Yeah. But, yeah, no, I like this movie too. I'm not sure... this was a good movie, but I'm not sure why there's all this crazy buzz about this movie.
Don't get me wrong, it was good. It was a very good documentary. I loved it. It touched me. I didn't get... Well, maybe I should ask you, how emotional did you get, Michael, over this movie?
There was a couple times where, I didn't get teared up, but, I was just... It was a little bit emotional. But I wasn't bawling my eyes out or anything. Yeah,
well, and see, same thing for me. There was quite a few times where they're introducing and talking about stuff where I'm like, oh, yeah, and, you get a little, not teared up, but you start feeling a little something here and there. But, I watched a couple reviews after seeing it where they were saying, from the first scene when they, open the box and pull out the trolley, they're, bawling. I'm like, I didn't feel that. It was a major important part of my childhood growing up, and it still sticks with me today like most people, but I didn't get, falling down, emotional over it. I mean, he did a great job at what he did. He was successful. It wasn't tragic. Wasn't a child molester. He wasn't, it wasn't dark. It wasn't horrible. He was, in all intents and purposes, successful at what he tried to do, in my opinion. now when you look at the world today, which is a fun topic we can get into, and we could probably have 10 podcasts just on that, but did Mr. Rogers and what he tried to bring to society and to the world and to the children even make an effect? Because think about it. He's been doing this since 1968 until 2001, which I had no idea he kept going until 2001. I thought he stopped. Again, I don't pay attention when I was a kid.
Right.
When I stopped watching, I stopped watching. I figured it just ended with me in, the 80s and 90s, early 90s, But no, he kept going.
Now, Matt, talking about that just a little bit, there's this thing in there where there was like a clip, and it was showing, I think, like a Fox News guy talking about Mr. Rogers created the entitled generation by telling everybody that you're special and all this stuff. And I am absolutely against that. I didn't think that was what Mr. Rogers was doing, but
it's absolutely nothing but bullshit, if you ask me.
I think they were trying to spin that in the documentary just a little bit to say... I don't know. I don't know what that was for, because it didn't seem like it really belonged in there. But Mr. Rogers would tell everybody that they were important, and that he accepted everybody for who they are, which is great. That's a good message, but it wasn't like everybody gets a medal. It wasn't this everybody's a trophy. I don't feel like they were like blurring the lines of what his message really was and what people were trying to use it as. Kind of this fake news.
It wasn't the participation trophy that everybody keeps trying to make it out to. That everyone gets a trophy for participating in blah, 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 blah. The thing that I found interesting, the reason why it was in the documentary, I can explain that, is because it was news. It was news. It was in major newspapers across the country and major news outlets. It wasn't just on Fox News. It was on everyone. And Fox News might have been the first one to start talking about it, but everyone did a story about it. And not a story, more of an editorial, which is an opinion. But that's where people really get, especially today. I mean, I can go on about this, especially being in the news industry. There's opinions, and then there's facts, which is news. And Fox News, specifically network news, CNN, MSNBC, especially in the past 20 years, has really gotten good at blurring the line between news and opinion. And that's an opinion piece. They don't tell you it is, but they say this is an opinion piece. The thing that I found interesting about it is that the clip they use specifically is the Fox News clip. And Mr. Rogers clearly was a lifetime registered Republican. I think they even said it in the movie.
Yeah, they
he was
did.
religious.
They said that.
Yeah, he was religious. I don't think they talked about this a little bit about Officer Clemson was homosexual, and Mr. Rogers did not accept that openly on TV until much later in the show, if at all, really.
Well, I think he accepted him.
He accepted him as a person, right?
Yeah, but not for the show due to what the controversies. Although he did take on a lot of controversies, so that was a little weird that he didn't take that one on.
Well, and I have an explanation for that as well. That is his Christian and religious upbringing, because you know that the church and Christianity looks down on homosexuality immensely. And so I think that's why Fred never really addressed that on his show. Sure, he was okay with, Officer Clemson. Officer Clemson being on the show and being his friend and things like that, but I don't think he...
Yeah, it was touching on the race stuff, especially at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And, there's a scene where it shows them, washing their feet together, and it was it was a message that everybody should be treated equally, I think.
Well, they parallel it with a time in, I believe this was the 60s, this was really early on in the show, where the civil rights movement was going on, And there was this famous story, or they had news footage of it actually, where a hotel owner was kicking some black kids out of his pool at the hotel by using cleaning chemicals and dumping it all over them and dumping it all in the pool, trying to chase them out of the pool. Well, Mr. Rogers saw that, and he does the exact opposite. He invites the black police officer to come and put his feet in his pool, and he even offers to wash them.
Yeah.
So that was just his statement against that, and saying, no, everybody's equal, no matter what.
Yeah, and like he addressed the Kennedy assassination. Like I think that was the first week the show was on, which is insane.
Yeah, the Robert Kennedy assassination.
Yeah, Robert Kennedy, not JFK, because it wasn't on yet. But yeah, but he wanted to explain it for the kids. It was amazing. He definitely did a lot of talking to the kids in ways that kids understood.
All right, so Mike, since you brought it up in the last one, you are going to get to deal with it. How does Won't You Be My Neighbor fit with the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Oof, man. This was a hard one. This was a very hard one to relate, because it's a documentary. There's not as many people in it. There's mostly people that are themselves. But, luckily, I'm going to ruin this name because I'm so good at pronouncing names. The guy who worked on Won't You Be My Neighbor, in the sound department, named Arjun Benga. He worked on The Avengers as also in the sound department.
Huh. Okay, that makes sense. I could see something like that fitting out, because there's probably not a whole lot of guys in Hollywood that do sound. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a significant amount, but not a ton. So clearly it would have worked on something.
Yeah, but other than that, like, nothing with the director and cinematographer. I mean, most of the major cast, there was nothing. Like, I was getting real nervous there for a few minutes.
See, I figured you were going to do something like based on like Bill Clinton or someone like that being in one of the movies. Like, there's a clip of probably Bill Clinton in one of them, or Al Gore or something.
Well, I was thinking about doing that, but then I found this guy, so I didn't have to try and...
Hey, at least you're honest about it.
Yeah, no. But yeah, I like this movie. It was good. It was neat to see some of the stuff that I didn't know about how Mr. Rogers came about, and Fred Rogers' role in television, and even with the invention of television, how he just kind of was driven to be on it and wanted to talk to the kids and stuff, and his whole background in child development. It was kind of interesting. I didn't know that he had done all that schooling for that, and it was pretty cool.
Well, but, think about it as well. He grew up in a time where there was no internet, there was no smartphones, there was no Facebook, there was no technology, basically, and radio was pretty much all you had, and they even touch about it. He talks about, like, the first time he ever saw, like, a TV. Like, he didn't even have a TV as a kid, and to go from not even really understanding a TV to understanding the power of a television and what we really should be doing with it, and media and things like that. I mean, that's extremely intelligent and smart.
Yeah, it did kind of highlight that. It seemed like he knew that the TV could be a wonderful tool, and he wanted to use that tool. And he did?
To help kids, yeah. Instead of just showing, the silly, fun, stupid stuff or the violence, which, I watched a lot of those shows that they referenced in the documentary. Of course, I'm a child of the 80s and early 90s, much like yourself.
Yep, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's why I like pizza.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they had Transformers in there. They had a He-Man, I think, at one clip, maybe G.I. Joe 2. You know, I watched all those. Who didn't, you know, growing up in the 80s and 90s? I mean, that was our TV, you know, and none of that stuff was really smart. Sometimes they would have some words of, I guess, suggestion, like don't do drugs and things like that, but they never really had like learning moments like Mr. Rogers did.
Yeah, no, you're right. Although I think Captain Planet, man, recycle, reduce, reuse.
Reduce, reuse, recycle. Oh, yeah. Everybody loved Captain Planet. Classic. So, anyways, I liked this movie a lot. I thought it was a very well done documentary, but I do have one thing that I really was kind of disappointed that they didn't have in it.
What was that one thing, Matt? Tell me.
Are you intrigued?
I am intrigued.
I personally would have liked to have known a little bit more about his home life.
Yeah, it only showed a few clips, and even the kids, it sounded like they had to play second fiddle to Mr. Rogers a little bit growing up, and that was a little bit hard on them. But it didn't dwell on that too much.
Right, and that's one of those things that I was kind of interested in knowing and seeing, is because a lot of these childhood
icons?
What do I want to say? Icons, yeah. Childhood icons give up a lot of their own family life and being with their children and taking their kids out and, you know, to movies and malls and hanging out with their kids to help the world's kids kind of thing. And I always figured Mr. Rogers probably was one of those people that sacrificed his own children for the good of everyone else's. And I really wish they would have had a little bit more of that. It didn't need to be long, but I think if they would have had 15, 20 minutes. I mean, they had everyone's still alive in the Rogers family except for Fred. You know, his sons, his wife. Spend 15, 20 minutes discussing that. I think that would have really added to this film.
Yeah, but I think the film wanted to focus on, the neighborhood. It wanted to focus on the show.
Right, and that's true. It did really kind of focus more on the show than on him as a person, but I don't know. I think it was probably split kind of 50-50.
Yeah. I mean, it did talk about some of his stuff in his personal life, of course, because it affects the show. I mean, it's all intertwined, and it's hard to just draw a line in the sand and say, this is the show, this is that. But it was kind of endearing. There was one of the old stage crew. I don't remember his name, but he was talking about how it was just such a pleasure to work with Mr. Rogers, or Fred Rogers, because he was such a great guy. He was always really nice to all the staff. It sounded like he had worked on some other projects, and that was not always the case.
Well, and I think the point the guy was trying to make as well is that Fred would be sitting there talking directly to the children, in not so much children tones, but like any adult would kind of try and relate with children and get down on their level and be on their level, not talk down to them, but be on their level. And when the camera stopped rolling, he was just a normal everyday dude who would sit there and fart around with everyone else on the staff. Like he didn't always have that child kind of thing going. He did have his adult sense of humor, and he did, go along with some of the adult pranks and things that were going on behind the scene. Yeah.
I guess that's true. Yeah, you're right. They wanted to show him as a, because I guess one of the big questions, even in the documentary, is he always like he is on the show? And I guess the answer is yes and no. So. Yeah,
because, I mean, like they said, anytime anyone would see him, he was that guy. Like, and his sons even talk about that. When he was home, he was that guy. But that's where some of it kind of takes a dark turn, and you find out why he never really gets upset and why he never voices his emotions and opinions and things is basically because he was raised not to.
Yeah, he came from a family where you didn't get angry. I think that was explained very early in the beginning of the film, yeah.
Well, and it takes a little bit of a dark tone because being taught that as a child, he has all those feelings and emotions, good and bad, just bottled inside him. And as they point out, he uses the puppets kind of to channel all of that, especially Daniel. Like, his wife even alludes to it in the documentary about how Daniel is basically who she thinks Fred really is.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
He's insecure. He's scared. He's, what if they don't like my show? You know, just like, you know, not to touch on my own world, but just like any other tortured artist out there. I don't care what kind of medium it is, but that's when you're giving a part of your soul to others to see and judge and view. All artists question it. They all do, no matter who.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so Mike, Won't You Be My Neighbor? What do you give it in film reels?
I think I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5 reels. I really like the movie, but I don't think it's quite deserved of all the hype. But it was a very good educational documentary that wasn't too slanted, because usually all documentaries are slanted in some way, and it wasn't too slanted, and it was just neat to find out about Fred Rogers and Mr. Rogers in the neighborhood. You know, it was kind of neat to see that, because I grew up watching Mr. Rogers just like everyone, so I enjoyed it. So I think everyone should go see this. This is cool. It's cool that a movie like this made it to the theaters on a little bit more of a wide release. It's probably not going to be there for very long, so if you have a chance to go see it, if it's at your theater, you got to go this week, because I think it's going to be gone soon.
I second that. If you want to go see this movie in the theaters, go see it now, because it's going to be gone before you know it, because it's an independent film. It's a documentary.
Yeah, so Matt, what do you give it? What is your rating?
This is going to be 2 in a row, Mike, but I also give it a 4 out of 5. Now, the reason why I didn't go above a 4 out of 5 is kind of what exactly we just touched on. You just touched on. I would have liked to have seen more of the family life. And then the other thing is, it's a great documentary. I think everybody should go see it, but you don't have to go see it in the theaters. If you don't get the chance to feel like, you're missing out on something, because it's a documentary. You don't need to have the big screen. You don't need to have the community. You don't need to have the people laughing. You don't need the surround sound. You can sit down, fire it up on Netflix or Amazon or HBO or whatever, and watch it there. So if you miss it in the theaters, don't kick yourself. Watch it at home. But I definitely think people should see it.
Yeah, I'm sure that this will be on Amazon or Netflix or both fairly soon, because it's done so well, and they seem to both support documentaries pretty well.
But yeah, that's the only point downgrade that I give it, is because you don't have to see it in the theaters. You really don't. It's wonderful. It's very good. If you want to have an evening out and you don't know what to see and you don't want to see a summer blockbuster and you want something a little bit more informational, take your kids with you. Go see it. You'll have a good time. They might not get it. Depends how old they are. But it's a well-done documentary. It really is.
Yeah, very well done.
All right, so on that note, Mike, anything else you want to add about Won't You Be My Neighbor?
No, I think we covered it all. This was a good documentary. Oh, did we want to talk about the controversies with the gay stuff?
I was wondering if you wanted to touch about that or not, or the Navy SEAL thing. I personally never heard either of those, but I guess I was sheltered. I don't know. Maybe my mom just didn't talk to people about that stuff. But go ahead, Mike. Talk about the controversies that they address in the film. A couple more, shall we say.
Yeah, there was a couple things where it looked like people were protesting and saying that Mr. Rogers was gay. and I'm not sure why, and it didn't explain it too much. And then there was other rumors that he was a Navy SEAL, and I'm not sure why that was either. But what would it matter if he was a Navy SEAL? To me, it would. It was like that would be something that he did before he was Mr. Rogers. So who cares?
Right, and that's one of the interesting things. When I was at work, one of the coworkers asked me specifically, well, I thought, she hadn't seen it yet, but she's like, well, I thought it was really crazy that Mr. Rogers was a Navy SEAL sniper in Vietnam. And I'm like, he wasn't. That's a myth. I don't know where that came from, but it's a myth. And I think, just by me guessing, I think that people just can't believe that someone was really this nice and kind to others, that they have to have something in there to make him a little dark and a little evil, and that he's just like everyone else. Not that I'm saying Navy SEALs are evil, but someone inherently trained to kill other people is a little darker than a minister.
Oh, well, I guess that's true. When I think of SEALs, I think of, just the ultimate soldier. And I don't really think that they are weapons of murder, but yes, they are.
Well, I'm not trying to say they're weapons of murder. You know what I'm saying, Mike. I'm trying to say, both of us grew up around the military quite a bit. But you know what I'm trying to say, that I think the public, or whoever started these rumors, was looking for something to tarnish Mr. Rogers', persona or whatever.
Reputation,
right.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's this really nice, great guy, but yet, did you know that he can kill people? And he has killed people, kind of thing? That's all. I'm not saying anything for or against Navy SEALs, shit, if you really want to get into that, I idolized the living hell out of them when I was growing up as a kid. I used to read books about Navy SEALs and watch movies about Navy SEALs. And, my good friend until I went to middle school, he was obsessed with being a Navy SEAL. He even actually got to the point where he tried. He failed, but he tried.
Yeah, no, so, it's super hard, man. It's super hard to get through the training.
Well, I think if he would have not been a massive drug addict, I think he probably could have been a SEAL. He was that hardcore and dedicated into wanting to be one. But he was also a pretty hardcore drug addict when he was in the Navy.
Well, on that somewhat sad note...
Bizarre, strange note, yeah.
I think we're going to end it. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you for listening to The Real Film Nerds. Now, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Real Film Nerds. Now, go out and catch a movie.